Correspondingly, female beauty had more to do with a plump, stout figure than the skeletal fashion models of today. Skinniness was a blaring sign of meager wealth and also sickliness, which implied that the woman was either unfertile or likely not to survive in childbirth. Such qualities were hardly desirable in a society where mortality rate was high. The disrupted continuing of the bloodline important and modern medicines unknown. Note that this was much here the corset whims of European aristocracy, which yet again reshaped the concept of female beauty. Regarding the less physical attributes, there obviously are examples of giants that find their pleasures and misdeeds and thievery and have just as much intelligence as a drowned ant. However, it is interesting to note that for instance the giant Hrungnir, who started bragging on having his powers and threatening the Aesir in his halls, was under the heavy influence of alcohol. Otherwise, he was described as a sharp-eyed man who owned one of the best horses about. If it had not specially been stated that he was a giant, wouldn't he, in this light, sound rather like your average human being? And in the end, Thor and charms are hardly any more cultivated. Thor often killed giants just because they were, well, giants. Freya paid the price of the necklace for the dwarves had prepared for her by sleeping with each one of them in turn. It needs not to be explained that these kinds of attitudes and activities are called. There are countless of other examples of the Aesir not being anyhow morally or otherwise above the other races. Their immortality is also arguable. The story about Baldur, Odin's son, death is among the better known sagas. Everyone in Valhalla is heavily dependent of the apples of Odin in order to retain their youth and wits. Frankly, all the races in the Norse mythology are quite much of the same human level. All have their special skills and weaknesses. An inclination of scheming, thieving, and rashness is distributed evenly. Men, gods, dwarves, and giants likewise can possess intelligence and vice versa. The Jotuns identified. So, who actually were the Jotuns? It is even possible to attach something mundane to them. Concerning that one is dealing here with mythology. Also note that the purpose here is not to promote any kind of racial supremacy, only to speculate possible connections between mythology and history. That's interesting, they are making that connection. Snorri Sturluson was among the first to introduce the theory of euhemerism, a concept that treats mythological characters as having once been real persons, but who have later become shrouded in mystery or have been elevated into deities. Ancestor worship has been an important part of practically every culture for thousands of years. Therefore, it only can be astonished over why real persons might more or less gradually turn into gods. The process can be beholden clearly even in the modern cultures, and the transformation does not require even many decades. Jack the Ripper and Adolf Hitler are good examples of fairly new occurrences, considering that the recorded human history extends itself back thousands of years. Vlad III, the Impaler, alias Dracula, is barely even considered a perfectly non-supernatural entity when is talked about. Not that the existence of the supernatural as such can be proven false, but that is not the topic of discussion here. Now that the concept of euhemerism was briefly explained, can we return to the major's theme? Euhemerism will play an important role in the forthcoming speculations. The Eddas, which are perhaps the more known sources for the Jotun mythos, do not offer any exact information about neither the lands the giants inhabit nor reveal their ethnicity. Jotunheim is described as a mountainous, forbidding place near the World Sea. Thick forests and snow are mentioned, and such places as Primherm and Glacisvelir, glittering plains, are situated in the country. The Jotuns also wage constant wars with the Aesir, which would suggest that the myth has significant basis in some long-winged strife between a Germanic people, the Aesir, and some other northern race in the Scandinavian, Finland, Russian region. At least, it can be with certainty concluded that the Jotunheim did not lie anywhere near Sahara. In that case, the Jotuns would have been called melting ice giants. Yet, such epics as the Orkneyinga saga do give significant clues. The opening portion of the Orkneyinga saga, the discovery of Norway, mentions the following. There was a man called Frodjot. He had 3 sons. One was Leir, another Logi, the third Canary. He ruled over winds, but Lori over fire, Leir over the seas. Canary was the father of Jotuns, the father of the King Snow. But the children of King Snow were these: Tori, Fon, Drifa, and Mjol. Tori was a noble king. He ruled over Gotland, Vinland, and Finland. To him, the Vens sacrificed that it might be snowy, and that there might be good going on snowshoeing. Lier and Lori both are depicted as Jotuns in the Eddas. The exact translation of Frodjot's name of the Old Norse to English is not clear, but very likely it is composed of the words Forn and Jot, which together stand for Old Giant. In the other parallel form of the same story, he rules the same lands as his descendant Tori. As for those, Finland is a clear case, even though it is in this context would apply to a much smaller tribal region situated in the southwestern Finland, known in the old text as Varsinais-Suomi. The proper Finland. Besides, the geography of what is today collectively known as Finland was rather differently outlined in the Iron and Bronze Ages. The bedrock has risen with considerable speed during the millennia and has not yet halted on its way up. It should tell something that, for instance, the coastline of Ostrobothnia was 100 kilometers more to the east 2,000 years ago, and that when the building of the castle of Turku began at the end of the 13th century, it was located on an island that could be approached only by ships. Nowadays, the castle stands on a long path of dry ground near the harbor of Turku. There exists a lorry load of theories about the range and geographical placement of the Vinland, a now border-wise defunct land called Kenuma, Finnish, which would have been situated in either around Ostrobothnia or southern Finland, is the most popular suggestion. I am inclined to lean towards the Ostrobothnia case. See the Vinland example further in this article. Even though the reach of the terrain might have extended itself, perhaps even to the other side of the Gulf of Bothnia. So, there was a line of men that can be identified as Jotuns and their old Finnic lands. That destruction did not yet prove that these mythical characters, possibly also Eumerized real people, would be Finnic themselves. Gotland belongs nowadays to Sweden, and yet, as such, this does not testify either that Fornjot's kin would have been a Germanic origin or spoken a Proto-Germanic language. The borders of lands change during centuries. New countries crop up, old ones merge together, some die entirely. Finland was for a time under both Sweden and Russia's reign, and after the World War II, such fine Finnish lands as Karelia have again belonged to the Soviet Union and now to Russia. Estonia and Latvia emerged from Russia in the early 90s. And both their languages belong to the same Baltic Finnic family as Finnish. Again, language does not explicitly mean that someone is of a certain ethnic origin. Nevertheless, in the case of the Baltic Finnic languages and the tribe people speaking them, genealogy studies suggest that these two attributes are up to some degree linked together via certain allogroups inherited through the father line. This will be dealt with later. To be frank, my personal interest is more targeted towards the mystery of the spoken languages of the so-called giants. Genes commonly become mixed over time, and it's hard to find anything that would purely, between commas, present the first father-mother origin, unless the descendants are clones or products of long-winded incest. However, some light has to be cast in genealogy if one wishes to address any physical features. Regarding the less physical attributes, there obviously are examples of giants that find their pleasures and misdeeds in thievery and have just as much intelligence as a drowned ant. However, it is interesting to note that for instance, the giant Rainier, who started bragging on having his powers and threatening the Aesir in his halls, was under the heavy influence of alcohol. Otherwise, he was described as a sharp-eyed man who owned one of the best horses about. If it had not especially been stated that he was a giant, wouldn't he in his correspondingly female beauty had more to do with a plump, stout figure than the skeletal fashion models of today. Skinniness was a blaring sign of meager wealth and also sickliness, which implied that the woman was either unfertile or likely not to survive in this light sun, rather like your average human being. And in the end, Thor and charms are hardly any more cultivated. Thor often killed giants just because they were, well, giants. Freya paid the price of the necklace for the dwarves had prepared for her by sleeping with each one of them in childbirth. Such qualities were hardly desirable in a society where mortality rate was high. The disrupted continuing of the bloodline important and modern medicines unknown. Note that this was much here the corset whims of European aristocracy, which yet again reshaped the concept of female beauty.